Well, good afternoon, and thanks for all of you being here and staying late this evening. My name is Major General Glenn Lesniak. I'm the Deputy Commanding General for Support for the U.S. Army Reserve Command, stationed down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And it sure is a pleasure for me to be here and share with you current status on training in the Army Reserve and the way ahead. Next slide. The Army Reserve is America's federal force of decisive action, providing indispensable capabilities to the Army and the Joint Force. Never in our nation's history has the Army Reserve been more indispensable to America's Army, and after a decade of war, it has evolved into an essential part of the total force. And that's evident by the signing of the total force policy by the Department of Defense back this past December. Army relies heavily on the Army Reserve for its technical enabling capabilities. We provide trained, equipped, ready, resilient, and accessible soldiers, leaders, and units across a full range of operations. Another point I'd like to mention is the Army Reserve is also a very efficient and effective investment for the country. We provide 19% of the force at only 6% of the budget, of the overall Army budget. Next slide. Talk to you a little bit more about who the Army Reserve is. We're 205,000 strong. You can see that we provide soldiers across quite a wide range of occupational specialties. There's over 13,000 soldiers today deployed in support of our contingency operations around the world. Point came up yesterday about the ARFRGen cycle, and we do have our own Army Force generating cycle for the Army Reserve. It's a 5-year program, and each year it provides 24,000 soldiers, makes them available to the force across the world. Well integrated into our active formations. We have capabilities that are different than the National Guard. They're predominantly combat oriented, and of course our formations are combat support, combat service support oriented. And we provide vital military capabilities across those 3 major technical areas. Medical, which of course is our core competency, and that's been the history of the Army Reserve. It was founded to be a medical reserve. So 60% of the medical units reside in the Army Reserve. Over 90% are in the legal commands, and 80% of the total forces, civil affairs, is in the Army Reserve. And you can see in bullet number 9 there, the other key enablers where we provide over 40% of the force in our component. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about the way we currently train. We have 4 training commands right now, and they touch every aspect of military training. We'll start in the upper left with the 108th Training Command, located in Charlotte, North Carolina. They're predominantly a force that provides drill sergeants, trainers, and leader trainers for the active component to supplement them predominantly during the surge and in times of contingency. And their main focus is basic combat training, AUSA. We support ROTC, so both summer camps, both up in Joint Base Lewis McChord and also down at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we support the summer training up at West Point. And we have a task force that's been continually mobilized here. We continue to refresh that with new mobilized soldiers every 9 months, providing theater security cooperation over in theater. And there's the 80th Training Command, located in Richmond, Virginia. And they're a cadre of professional military trainers. They provide predominantly MOS reclassification training. Our soldiers come in from, of course, active duty, our individual ready reserve pool, and some come through USAR, through new hires, non-prior service. Those coming in from active and the IRR, depending on where they live and what units are around, they may need to pick up a different occupational specialty. So that's what the 80th Training Command is there to do, is help them get retrained in their new specialty. And they're also involved in non-commissioned officer education system. They do both the senior and advanced leadership courses. And they teach ILE, intermediate leader education for officers, predominantly captains and majors. Then we've got the 84th Training Command, located at Fort Knox, Kentucky. They're our executive agent for our combat support training programs. And these are called for us WARX and CSTX. These are large collective training exercises, multifunctional, multi-echelon, that we conduct in years 2, training ready years 2 and 3. So that's years 3 and 4 of our ARFRGEN cycle in preparation for our units being ready to be made available in their 5th year. And their main focus is the pre-deployment validation. And our 4th Training Command, the 75th Training Command down at Houston, Texas, is our Mission Command proponent. They teach Mission Command, and they do that predominantly to the battalion and higher level staffs, teach MDMP. They're our simulations driver, so that's where all the experts are in the Army Reserve on how to put on a simulated exercise and work with all of the current simulation systems. And they're also our key integrator for live, constructive, virtual, and gaming. I'll talk some more about that when I talk about the way ahead. Next slide. So just what are our challenges as we move forward in the training arena? Of course, with the overseas contingencies drawing down, we need to change the way that we're preparing our soldiers for the future and the way that we train. The intent is to try to preserve as much of these vital skills that we've learned here over the last 12 years. We don't want to lose our edge in what's now an operational reserve. So we're there, we're able to support the combatant commands throughout the active component and also National Guard units that are deployed in an operational mode as opposed to waiting for a big call-up. We need to stay in that ARFRGEN cycle to keep our skills tuned, and we need to stay integrated with the active component and the National Guard as we move forward. Of course, there's going to be challenges with available funding, in some cases available space, and that may provide us an opportunity to do some more cross-component exercises with the active duty if they have challenges on their installations with training space. In addition to the budget constraints, we're also gearing ourselves up for regional alignment in support of the Chief of Staff of the Army. We want to stay focused on joint exercises as much as possible, so we don't lose that capability that we've picked up here over the last few years. And an emergency, the emergency DISCA requirements. So that's through the NDAA 12304A, passed at the end of 2011. We've got the ability now to support the National Guard and national emergencies. And of course, trying to maintain high training standards on a shrinking budget. So let's talk now for a few minutes about the way ahead for these different units. So go to the next slide. So for the 108th, for our initial military training organization, of course, I mentioned they're transitioning from a mobilization to a peacetime model. So what does that mean? Today, with the OCO dollars, the extra funding that's been made available, we've been able to put our soldiers on long tours for anywhere from 6 to 12 months to go out, our drill sergeants, and be embedded in the combat training centers, the centers of excellence, training centers of excellence, Fort Sill, Fort Benning, Fort Leonard Wood. And they've been able to stay on station there and supplement the cadre. Well, as we come away from the mobilizations, as we come away from the OCO, dependency on OCO, we'll have to go back to our 2-week rotational model. We'll be starting that here at Fort Jackson next month. And that's where the unit will send a cadre of drill sergeants every 2 weeks, a different group over the 10-week period of the basic training cycle. So we'll be transitioning back to that mode. One other aspect that's been refreshing to see here in the 108th is the way that the drill sergeant school is managed. To me, it's the epitome of what the One Army school system ought to look like. It's a combination of, on the cadre for the drill sergeant leaders, Army Reserve and active component trainers. So the professional cadre is a mix, about 2/3 to 1/3, 2/3 active component, 1/3 Army Reserve. Of course, the staff that they train, the drill sergeant candidates that come in, is also a mixture of active and Army Reserve soldiers. And they do an excellent job of providing professional training for those future trainers of our new soldiers. Totally integrated. In fact, the leadership of the academy is shared between an active component, a commandant, sergeant major, and an Army Reserve Sergeant Major as the Deputy Commandant. And then the 108th is the major recruiting program for drill sergeants throughout the Army Reserve. It's not done through some other agency. It's done predominantly by the 108th. And particularly interested in recruiting female drill sergeants into the program. And there is a higher density of female soldiers, female NCOs in our ranks, given that they're combat support and combat service support currently. So we've got a good opportunity there to bring female drill sergeants on board. Next slide. Talk about the 80th, our professional trainers for military occupational skill qualification. So what's driving their transition now is the need to embrace the One Army school system. So we're going to a standard curriculum, the TAT-C, the Army Training System courseware, minimal variations, if any, in opportunities for soldiers to take those courses in a different mode. So it's a standardized training curriculum. We've gone from providing training in 112 locations throughout the United States down to 18, and ultimately we want to get down to providing training in 12 of those locations. And then our force mix in our particular, across the 80th, there's not enough instructors. So today, again, we're relying on having that additional funding to bring instructors on full time. So in the future, we won't have that money, so we need to retool the structure so we have more instructors assigned to the AEVS so they can support the requirements of the RPRINT in support of the One Army school system. Next slide. Now we move into the collective training environment. And bullet 3 on the slide that you're looking at completely encompasses what the 84th Training Command is there to do. Run collective training events, multifunctional, multi-echelon, and challenge our units and prepare them for their available year in our 5-year ARFRGEN training cycle. In addition to being the executive agent, the 84th, represented by the logo, circular logo, it focuses on the dirt lane, on the live portion of the training at the platoon and company level. So they coordinate the OCs to come in from 1st Army to help run and evaluate that training. At the same time, the 75th Division is integrated, and they're focusing on training those battalion and higher level staffs for mission command and teaching them the tenets of military decision-making process. So that's all melded together by the 88th to bring those skill sets together. And the picture at the bottom of the page depicts where in our 5-year ARFRGEN cycle those events are occurring. WAR-X predominantly in Train and Ready Year 2, or the 3rd year of the ARFRGEN cycle, and in CSTX in the 4th year. Next slide. It's another illustration of where we reside for collective training. So it's got the headquarters locations, the 3 Army Reserve Training Centers of Excellence that we manage, Joint Base Dix McGuire Lakehurst in New Jersey, Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, and Fort Hunter Liggett, California. Just a bigger picture summarizing what I just mentioned. Next slide. So again, the way ahead here for the 84th, in addition to putting on those multi-echelon, multifunctional events, we want to expand their capability so we can keep the training environment complex and ambiguous as we can to challenge our soldiers and cause them to be put in situations where they have to adapt to the situations or provide adaptable leadership to their soldiers. So we want to encompass functional exercises. Today we have quite a few independent functional exercises, engineer bridging exercise in Arkansas, independent MP exercises, or transportation exercises. So wherever we can and wherever it makes sense to fold those exercises underneath one of our CXTX or WAR-X's that are going on. Last year we ran 4 of those exercises. This year we'll run 5. Ultimately, next year we'll be at 6, and that's where we want to stay. 6 exercises, 2 at each of our training centers of excellence, about 8,000 soldiers involved in each exercise. So again, looking for ways to fold in other training events into those exercises. I've mentioned multi-component. Want to maintain that joint flavor. So as we get our baseline in place here next year with those 6 exercises, starting to invite Air Force and Navy units in and maintaining that joint flavor. And then with our locations there on the East Coast in New Jersey, got the opportunity to have multinational and interagency contacts, again, to keep that virtual, simulated, live, and constructive training environment as robust as we can. Next slide. And then the 75th Training Command. This is where, as I mentioned before, those four components of current training, live, constructive, virtual, and gaming, all come together. And this is where we need to focus, and as we've got these shrinking dollars available moving forward, where are we going to get more for our investment? And it's going to be in integrating these four components of training. So right now we've got distributed simulations capability. We ran a pilot here this last fall, was very successful. So each of the training divisions, and there's 5 of them throughout the 75th Division, is working to embed that capability. And what they could do then is run an exercise, say at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, have units at their home station, battalion level staffs, brigade level staffs. So in the past, we've had to make them notional units in the exercise because they weren't there, or we'd have to have pucksters move them artificially around the simulation game board. In this case, we'll be able to leave units in their home station, save money on transportation, and get them involved in the exercise through this distributed simulations capability. The Training Brain Operations Center, it's a component of TRADOC down here at the Fort Eustis area, looking to integrate that capability into helping us design more sophisticated and challenging exercises in the future. Integrating cyber. So this year we've got cyber units within our formations, bringing those to the exercise to give some feedback to the soldiers as to how secure their networks are and their communications techniques. And then next year we'll look to integrate cyber as part of the scenario. Mentioned that the 75th is our proponent for Mission Command, so they're setting up an academy to make that a more formal training process. They're the organization that we rely on to keep our exercises doctrinally correct. And we want to expand that from just being doctrinally correct functionally into also making sure that they're doctrinally correct on a joint basis. And of course, as you get more and more sophisticated and more involved in simulations and virtual environments, you've got to have a good database, so knowledge management will continue to be critical. Next slide. And a couple other training initiatives we've got underway in the virtual arena. Of course, the engagement skills trainer is out there already. It replicates rifle marksmanship. In all the centers that we built here during the last BRAC, we've got a rifle marksmanship area built into all those reserve centers. Great place to deploy this particular capability. We're working on fielding 84 of these systems, and we've got 71 out there fielded right now. So about ready to finish that up and then, again, integrate that into our regular training. Virtual clearance training suite, looking to field 23 of these sites, got 8 out there right now. And these are simulators that soldiers can get in, engineer soldiers, and replicate route clearance activity and how to operate MRAPs and whatever the current equipment is. And again, not have to incur the expense of getting the equipment, the fuel expense, traveling to wherever this equipment is located. Can do that right in the comfort and security of their home station training locations. Dismounted soldier for individual soldiers, just 7 systems looking to be fielded here. We've got 3 of those out. And of course, medical simulation training. We've got 3 medical center training centers of excellence at our 3 Army Reserve training locations. And we've got 2 of those 3 systems fielded today. And then finally, on the gaming side, looking at the VBS2 suites, our demand is about over 300. We've got about 5 out there right now. So this is our biggest opportunity, is to field more of these gaming systems that the soldiers can use and learn. And of course, the soldiers of today, much more attuned to gaming and learning from that type of an interface. Our biggest holdup there in getting this equipment out is getting the right computers that can drive the software. In the next slide. So then in summary, We're looking to, of course, maintain our high training standards while working under conditions of constrained resources. We want to continue to produce technically and tactically proficient soldiers and units. Of course, that's our core competency. That's the mission of the Army Reserve in support of.
Folks, we will go ahead and shut it down now. We'll open tomorrow at 8:30. Those of you that are still in the hall, if you need to be in here, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. Just be advised that once you leave, there won't be reentry tonight. And we'll open up again tomorrow at 8:30.
Thank you for that announcement. I appreciate you all putting some extra effort in staying through the rest of the presentation. Third bullet, I talked before about how important it is for us to integrate these different elements of the training environment. Having soldiers out doing a live dirt lane, being able to monitor them in our CPOF equipment, have them show up on the simulation screen. Of course, the constructive, we've got a good platform of constructive training for simulation. Virtual, be pretty neat to be able to not just train soldiers independently in their training centers at home, their home station, but also be able to link that activity into the simulated training event. And of course, gaming to sharpen their skills in a very cost-effective way. So we'll continue fielding these capabilities. And bottom line, we want to continue to maintain our strong connection with TRADOC and, of course, First Army. We can't do this alone. It works much better as a combined effort with those three large organizations. A lot of good synergies between us and TRADOC, of course, with the 108th and the 80th on the individual soldier training. Huge synergy with us, with First Army, and getting our units ready to deploy with our collective training events. So we want to make sure because of constrained resources, we don't shrink back into our silos and just care about ourselves, but we stay engaged, because we'll get more out of working together than going back to independent operations. So again, I want to thank you for your time. Hope you'll be able to get something out of understanding a little bit more about who the Army Reserve is, where we're located, what we do in regard to training, and where we're headed as far as staying ahead of the resource-constrained environment in our training environment. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Any questions I could answer? Can I get? Sure. All right. I know it's the end of the day. Anything else? Well, again, thank you for your attention, your time, and have a good evening.